We will have the conversations that few are prepared to have, and more importantly, conversations centered on rationality. Subscribe now to listen to Rational Voices with Sunil. We have a great guest with us today, a famous actor many will know from the Thin Blue Line or Gimme Gimme Gimme. James Dreyfus, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for asking me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, back in the days when I was thin.
Well, what was? Let's go back to your early beginnings as an actor.
Yeah.
How did it begin? When did you know you wanted to be an actor, and how did it all just sort of start?
Well, I was at school and we had these porter cabins we were being taught in because they hadn't actually built a school block yet. And one day, all these boys came in, and the teacher came in, and I was sitting in an audition. And so I thought, well, I'll try it. And I think I was 12 or something, 11 and a half or something. And then I thought, well, this is the only thing now that I really want to do. And I sort of abandoned everything else.
Right.
Um, it was just something I discovered, and then thought, well, I'll try and make a go of this.
When did it really become like it was going to be your career, if you like, going forward? Was there a key landmark moment, or?
Well, I think making a decision to try and get into RADA, uh,
Okay.
uh, you know, and I thought, right, I'll try for that, and if I don't get in, that'll be a sign. But I got in, and yeah, it just went from there. And then I thought, of course, I had my parents saying to me, get a backup job and learn a trade or something. But I was just too lazy to do any of that, to be honest.
What was what was the first real role that you remember that you did where you thought, now, like, this is, a proud moment, proud role that you first did as in your acting career?
Um, well, because I've always been obsessed with comedians, and I spent a lot of time working with Alexei Sale and Jennifer Saunders. I worked with Lenny Henry, Rowan Atkinson. So I guess all those comedic jobs that I started doing were just like heaven to me because I was really working with people that I'd grown up with and
Right.
had admired. And in fact, one of the first people I worked with was Graham Linehan on his sitcom Paris, which was the one before Father Ted.
Okay.
Um, so it was just it was, I started in comedy and, but I was delighted to be a part of it because I was with my heroes, and who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah. Do you think that was where, you had your most joy in the sort of comedic roles? Was that like the most fun?
Um, no, it's harder because you have to get laughs.
Right.
I mean, before that, I was doing sort of, quite a lot of serious stuff, and that's different because all you have to do is make people very quiet. Um, uh, so getting laughs when people are not particularly in a mood to laugh, or you're not being particularly funny, can be the most horrendous, the most horrendous experience. Um, I mean, comedy. I understood comedy in my way of how it works and stuff. So, and because I was fascinated with comedians, especially people who made me laugh, um, it was a sort of natural thing to fall into, really. But I was very lucky because it sort of took off really quite quickly in my 20s.
All right. And what would you say was like your favorite role then that you took on as an actor? Was like the one that you most enjoyed?
The most enjoyed. Well, I really enjoyed playing Goody in Thin Blue Line. I really enjoyed Gimme Gimme Gimme. Although there were times where I could torn my own head off, um, because it's difficult doing it in front of a live studio audience and filming it at the same time. So that's always a bit of a nightmare because you just get very hard on yourself. but I don't really have sort of favourite roles because each I can tell you. I mean, I'm not going to tell you, but I can tell you. It's much easier to tell the roles I hated doing
Right. Okay.
than the roles I enjoyed because I tended to, as long as I was working with people, I respected and liked. I was having a blast, frankly.
Right. Yeah, you also played it, in the I was having a look on House of Dragons, which is pretty major to be on such a big show. What was that like experience like?
On Notting Hill.
On House of the Dragon?
Oh, House of the Dragon. Sorry,
Yeah.
you went. It went all funny for a second. I was playing a tiny little role as part of the council, um, but it was fun. I mean, I don't really understand fantasy drama as much.
Right.
There was a whole world in there that I had to sort of come to grips with, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And but I got to work with some great actors and actresses, and I had a blast. And actually, I was lucky to be part of it. It was but that's been sort of that's the actor's life. Is you go on to one job, then you leave, and you go and do another one, and then so it's but it was fun. Yeah, while it lasted, it was fun.
Well, we'll go on to sort of Doctor Who and all of that sort of stuff a bit later.
Yeah.
But what was it like in your around your fellow actors and your peers? Because clearly, as we now know, following what happened with Doctor Who and stuff, this seems to be that there was people with differing opinions. Was that always the case, even at the start of your acting career, or?
Never, never until about 10 years ago. Uh, because people didn't. I mean, I worked with people whose opinions on things I never knew because that's not what we spoke about. Nobody brought their entire selves to work because you have to be able to get on and work together. And if someone comes marching in and says, "Well, I believe this, I'm that, and this, that, and the other," it throws a whole cog in the machine, and you can't do it. So it never used to happen. Never.
Right.
So until about 10 years ago, then I started noticing, there's these different things happening, and I thought, well, and of course, social media just amplifies it, doesn't it? Because if you're on it, then people know what you think. So,
Right.
but then at the beginning of social media, everyone was told to get on it because that's how you get a job. So the whole thing was like a sort of catch-22. Um, but it was never like that. So, and I've always got on with people who I work with um, precisely because you don't know all about them. You meet their professional selves, and so it was never really an issue.
Right. So going back before 10 years ago, you wouldn't have these sort of personal political sort of discussions. It'd be a very rare thing if like that would happen.
Very rare thing. I mean, you'd go to the pub afterwards, but you didn't. I mean, there was a sort of unwritten rule that you just left religion and politics out of your professional life, because
Right.
they're two things that are very personal to one, and it's not something we discussed in the pub. We'd discuss forgetting our lines, or how rude the director was, or how awful the audience was that night, or sit around and do what most actors do, which is try to outbore each other with who they've worked with, who's the most famous person they've worked with. I mean, that's really what it's like. Uh, But suddenly, with this change, with this dynamic of identity having to be brought into everything, as far as I can see, it's done the opposite of what it sort of claims to want to achieve, which is sort of divide people so much more than it did before. So, and this is being done in the name of progress. So I don't get it.
When you started noticing this 10 years ago, was that more from social media? Was it people like that you were working with? Were they being a bit more just open with what they
It
believed
was a
in?
direct thing. It was from social media. So I remember it started on social media, and people say I mean, I only joined social media in 2014. So when I say 10 years ago, I'm only saying that from my experience.
Right.
Um, I'm sure it would happen before, but I started noticing, um, that things were taking just a very odd direction and odd decisions were being made. I mean, for example, the decision made by the old Vic to not put on Terry Gilliam, one of the Monty Python team's production of a Stephen Sondheim musical, because the staff, under the management, were unhappy about it because he'd made a Monty Python-esque joke.
Right.
Excuse me. And I thought to myself, well, it used to be the case that the dog wagged the tail, and now it seems to be the tail wags the dog. Um, and I've never been in a situation where workers at a theatre, ushers or backstage or thing, had a say in anything. You turn up, you do your job, you get paid, and you go. And what's on the stage or what is being said or not said is frankly neither here nor there. It's like being an actor. You read the play, you don't want to do it, you say no. You do want to do it, you do it. But then you don't do it and put rules around it. It just seems to be the opposite of what we try to do.
Why has there been such a push from the sort of the theatre world, Hollywood world, the acting world for a lot of this sort of talking progressive identity, all this, because it seems that industry seems to be really ripe with this sort of stuff. Why is that the case?
Um, well, from my own personal perception, I think for a lot of people, it comes from a place of an automatic response of, we're um, we're kind and we want to include everybody and art is for everybody. I think for a lot of people, it genuinely comes from a place of, but it's a misguided uh, 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 way of thinking at it, especially now knowing what we know now. And also, don't forget, if if the powers that be decide things should go a certain way, in other words, let's say I heard 8 years ago what it was that agents were telling new young actors to put your pronouns in your bio on social media. It'll increase your chances of getting work. So there's a huge um, uh, force going on above people, and actors have to fall in line because actors don't get to choose. Uh, what parts. I mean, you're at the mercy of casting directors, producers mainly, and directors. Less so directors now. I think they're sort of fourth on the list. I think it's producers, committees, and then and so the pressure is enormous. I also think some people do it to purely virtue signal. It's you know, some actors can be very airy fairy and say the most ridiculous things. So, but it is sad that identity politics has taken over the arts so quickly. Um, like having special evenings for special audiences, and I don't understand any of that. To me, that is no different to segregation. It's just a different way of segregating. And the whole point of the arts and literature and everything is to find a common purpose, to find a common theme. And I just believe that it's a misguided way. I don't believe the people are sort of evil. I just think that it's a misguided thing. And I also get a lot of private messages from a lot of well-known actors saying, "Look, I would speak out if I could, but I just can't." And I understand it. Food has to be put on the table, so it's a sort of horrible position to be in.
Do you think this will change that? Because we've just seen with the Trump presidential win, we saw essentially the whole of Hollywood, all the actors in America, almost solely endorsing Kamala Harris, and it made no difference whatsoever. Do you think that culture could be changing now, where actors and actresses maybe won't feel the same pressure? Do you think it could be?
Yeah, I tend to think it's going to be a bit like how a shoal of fish behaves. Well, everyone will go in one direction, and then eventually a fish will go. You know what? I think a big fish will go. No, I'm going to go that way. And once a big fish has done that, many little fish will follow, and because you've been given, you know, you're allowed to now. And I definitely think the dam might be breaking. I mean, I read the other day that there's a new Hollywood studio with Mel Gibson's doing something with Mark Wahlberg. They're doing something. Graham Linehan and Andrew Doyle are going with Rob Schneider to write things in America. So there are different possibilities opening up, which are great. But I think it's going to be, but the actual main part of the arts is still so embedded. It'll possibly be one of the last places, if it ever leaves, that it'll go from. And I don't know how much longer it'll take because this is so ingrained in institutions and has been for such a long time that to weed it out is going to be very difficult indeed.
I don't know. Your opinion on Switch would be really interesting. I feel like it's almost destroying a lot of the arts, like destroying a lot of the shows, movies, because they just seem so obsessed with this sort of identity politics, whatever. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not into sci-fi or anything, but if you read the pages of, how pissed off a lot of sci-fi people are with Star Wars and Disney and the franchises of what they're doing to it, and how much support they're losing. Because I think people just, at the end of the day, they want to see great characters. They want to see. I
Mm.
mean, and it's sci-fi. You're talking Wookiees. You're talking Ewoks. You know, you don't need anything else. Um, and I think it's being force fed it, and it's not just being force fed it. It's being force fed on a mass from everywhere, and I think that's what it's like the whole thing. Let's just say, for example, the BBC's obsession with drag queens, and
Mm.
people say, "Well, what's wrong with drag queens?" Well, nothing's wrong with drag queens, but when it's on television 20, almost 24 hours a day, people get a bit sick and they go, do you know what? This isn't novel anymore. We've done this. Um, Calm it down. Let's just get back to some semblance of telling a story, um, and not having to, you know, I did a job a couple of years ago, and I won't mention the name of the person, but this person turned around to me and said, do you know, I don't think I should be in this. And this person's black. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Tell me why. And they said, because I just know I'm a DIE hire, and I feel that. And I said, isn't that funny? And we spoke about it for quite a while. And their impression did not change throughout the entire job. And I completely understood what they were saying because I've been a DEI hire before. Let's get the game on. Let's get the, and you think no, and I think a lot of people are feeling that at the moment, and it was very interesting hearing, you know, because it was very obvious to them that the part was not written
Right.
for them, and I just thought it was a very interesting observation because we both looked around and we both thought, yeah, and it was very much, it was very everything was micromanaged to make sure this person had a moment, that person had a moment, that person, I mean, I remember the days when there used to be adverts and it used to be one person on the advert. Now it seems to be 12 people in every advert because you have to represent everybody. It's a bit like the little green man, a little green person that tells you to walk across the street at the traffic lights. How many do you need to be told you can walk across? You just need one. It's crazy. It sounds crazy to be saying it, but this is where we are.
It must be so degrading for the black actor
Mm.
to know that that's why you've been selected. It must be so. degrading, and
Yeah,
um, you know,
they were
you.
very pissed off, and it became apparent. This was on day two that this was said, and it became very apparent. And I thought, wow, God, and I'm sure a lot of people are walking around feeling exactly the same
Mm,
at the moment. But then a job is a job is a job, and there aren't many jobs. Actors don't work most of the time. Most of the time, we sit around, we're unemployed, unless you're very lucky and you're part of 0.2%. Um, and especially now, it's not good. So you're in a very difficult position.
what is it like in those periods when you're not working as an actor? I always found that really fascinating. Like, what's that like? So you get a job, you get paid for that job, and then you're just sort of looking for the next job. Is that kind of how it
Yeah,
works?
yeah. I mean, yes, I always love to hear when you see actors interviews saying, "Well, I chose to do this script because it really spoke to me," and you think to yourself, 9 times out of 10, you're doing it because you've been sent a script and you've
Yeah.
gone yes. So um, I'm sure there are people who have years booked ahead of them, and that's great, but you tend to job hop. It's rare to, unless you're in an ongoing soap opera or an ongoing drama. It's very rare to jump from job to job, which is why you'll find very famous actors turning up in your local theatre.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be West End. It can be because people just want to keep working, because there's nothing more stultifying than sitting at home, you know, looking through social media, thinking everyone's working or pretending to work.
yeah.
you know, it's rather like sort of artistic Facebook. You think everyone else is having a great time. Well, actually, they're probably not.
I've seen some really famous actors, even in the Windsor Theatre. It's not far from where I used to live,
Mm,
and there's so many famous ones. I was
absolutely,
so surprised.
absolutely, absolutely. So it's always it has always been like that. But repertory theatre is sort of gone now. But when I started, it was you went to a theatre, a place like Harrogate or Birmingham, and you did a couple, you did a season, and then you moved on. And I'm sure that applies still in some places, but it's sort of widely gone.
One of the things I wanted to discuss, because you've done so many comedic roles, is the kind of way the culture's changed in terms of, it's everyone's offended a lot now. Is that really damaging comedy? I can't think of a lot of good other comedy sketches or comedy shows I've seen in the last few years, and I think maybe that's because people are scared now. Or what's your take on, like, how do you do a comedic role now in 2025?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the comedies of, let's say, that were recorded in front of audiences, they seem to have all but vanished now.
Mm,
Um, and of course, it's not me to say there aren't funny people out there. There are funny people out there. It's just that there's nothing. There seems to be no boundaries to cross anymore. It's almost like there's an electric fence around everything, and you can sort of do something at the BBC and have a bit of a dig at the BBC, but you can't do what you used to be able to. But then you see, but then Ricky Gervais turns up and does Afterlife, and it's a
mm,
breath of fresh air, and you go, oh my God. And people are just crying out, I think, for very often. Sometimes I post little clips of Gimme, 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 for example, and the responses are just, oh my God, I missed that. I haven't laughed, blah, blah. And you just think to yourself, people really want. And I think the television commissioners are really missing a trick here, because if one was to commission a sort of, it doesn't have to be anti woke, it just has to sort of
yeah.
break down a few barriers and be a bit edgy and be hysterical and juvenile, it would go down like a house on fire. I mean, there's only so much sort of snide we're in the know. We're one of the few allowed comedians on television, wink, wink, that you can smirk at, and but to belly laugh, it's not often. I'm not saying it's not there because there are great people there, but there seems to be a sort of pool of 50 people that
Mm.
do, presenting, acting. It's and it's all they're all swapped round, and I just think the talent's not being utilised. So I guess you have to blame the people at the top.
Again, do you think that's just because of the cultural thing? Because they're almost scared to do this, like do a like a Only Fools and Horses, like these kind of just
Uh,
classic shows, and is
yeah,
it?
well, I think before there used to be some staying power. For the first series of Thin Blue Line, first series of Gimme 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 weren't terribly well received,
Right.
but they persisted with it because they thought, right, no, we've got to, we've got series two, and then and then we'll move on and we'll do another one. I think now it's rather like sort of holding hot potatoes. They get a bit nervous, they put a show out, and if suddenly an audience arrives for it, yeah, then you're okay. But it's more than often it's no, that's too risky. I'll drop that, which seems to me very strange because when you get, let's say, Dave Chappelle's show or Ricky Gervais's show, and they put it on, they get record figures, and I don't understand why there's so much of the same coming out. There's so much which is just the same, and you can't distinguish between these shows anymore. I mean, I just literally cannot distinguish between them. And I think people are really what they need now, especially now. What people really need is some escapism,
Mm.
and yes, there is fantasy drama, there is great stuff being made. I just think there's a really serious problem with comedy. Uh, and like I said, I think yes, I think people are scared, because once you let identity politics run rampant in the arts, you're going to be saying, well, you can't say that about that person. Oh, well, if you can't say that about that person, you can't say that about that person. Oh, well, then you can't say that about the. I mean, the better option is make fun of everybody
Yeah.
and do it. Make fun of absolutely everybody. And we once had that, but then people say, oh, you just want to say racist things or you just want to be offensive. And it's like, no, that's not the objective. Believe me, it's not the objective to go on and be vile to somebody. The job is to, we go back to this whole death us till death us do a part thing. Where some people saw Alf Garnett as this. Spokesman for the right wing, when in fact the whole show was created by people opposed to that, and they were showing him to be a bigot. So you'd laugh at him, not with him. So I guess we're just like I said, identity politics has made it virtually impossible because you've sort of everyone is exempt and everyone is equally special in their own little hutches.
It's crazy because all my favorite shows, like some of the ones I've watched, I've heard people come out and say they could never. Office, both Ricky Gervais and the American one, both Steve Carell and Ricky Gervais said they probably could not make those series now because there's no way that they could get away with the stuff they're saying. And maybe it's just me, but even people around, I can't think of many good comedy shows that I've watched in the last few years, films. I go to watch old stuff. I
Yeah,
don't see anything in the last
yeah.
few years that I've watched that I found remotely funny.
Well, I have to say, sort of, I've heard, I hear it every day. Exactly people saying the same thing every single day, and not just one or two. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of comments, just saying, give us something to laugh at. I mean, even though the old variety shows like, Morecambe and Wise and the Two Ronnies, and they put that on over Christmas, and I sat there with my mum and I just belly laughed, and I turned to her and I said, I haven't done that for a year. I haven't I haven't laughed like that for a whole year. But that's all gone now, and I just think people don't know because of this fear, like you say, because they put up this barricade that they're just scared, because suddenly if somebody says something and someone goes, "No, I'm afraid that's offensive," he put it on social media. Why, it's like throwing a rock in a hornet's nest. Let's all call the BBC. Let's pummel them. Let's pummel them. The BBC goes, "Oh, do you know what? I can't. I'm not." And of course, what do? Instead of going, "It doesn't matter that you're offended. You turn it off because other people are enjoying it." They decide to close the gates, and I just don't think, I don't see how that moves anything forward. I think what we're doing at the moment is stagnating.
Mm. I think you could argue that that's the UK in general right now.
Yes, you could.
We're stagnating. But let's talk about Doctor Who because that was, widespread news when that happened. You essentially were cancelled for your support on J.K. Rowling. If you could give an overview of what exactly happened there,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
yeah. I was contacted by. I was playing for the audio version of Doctor Who for a company called Big Finish, and I was playing the Master, and I'd done about, I don't know, 8 of these recordings. And I was contacted by Graham Linehan, who asked me to do 2 things: sign a letter condemning the abuse that J.K. Rowling was receiving, which on a secondly basis, and to sign a letter saying that Stonewall, instead of saying no debate, should open up to a rational debate on some issues. And I thought, yeah, of course I'm going to sign this. I mean, everyone's going to sign this. I thought it'd be one of a million names. No, apparently not. So it all kicked off when these letters and the names were signed, and I was immediately besieged online um, by people calling me transphobic, purely because I said no. I think this is horrific. I've read what J.K.
Mm.
Rowling has written, and I can't find anything that you're saying because I didn't know too much about it back then. Anyway, so I was swamped, and somebody started a petition, and and sometimes when people say terrible things, I fight back on Twitter and I say, no, screw you. I'm not. This is bullshit.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly started finding that the CDs would arrive and my name would be off the CD, or there'd be a picture of somebody else as the master on the front. And I called my agent and I said, "What's going on?" "No, no, nothing. Apparently, nothing's going on. Nothing." Anyway, this went on for about a month. And eventually I called them up. I said, "No, something is going on because this is the third one I've received. My name's not on it." And they got back to me and they said, well, yes, there is something going on. They like you a lot, but there's a problem with what you've been saying on social media. And I said, I haven't been saying anything of what I'm being accused of. After some of this criticism had gone ahead, Big Finish decided to put out a sort of one of those, statements, just saying, we have taken this decision because we are in a diverse, inclusive company, and
Yeah.
we don't tolerate transphobia in any way, shape, or form. Basically, what they were doing was throwing a dart at my back with the sign saying transphobe on the back. So that opened up a huge kettle of worms, and then they decided to release a CD called Masterful, which featured all 8 or 9 of the masters that they'd ever had on their audio thing, and they said, "We're not going to be including you." So that was the point when I just thought, "Oh, you know what, you buggers, you could have called me up and said, listen, can I just can I understand what your stance is? Can you fill me?" No, they did it all in this terribly public way, and it had quite large repercussions because I then had a swarm, thousands and thousands of people attempting to get me cancelled everywhere I tried to work. So yeah, it was a really it was an eye-opening period, put it like that.
Crazy, crazy. And I actually didn't know. I thought you'd said a lot more. Like it'd been very, you literally just signed a couple of letters like those. Doesn't seem. I thought you'd maybe as you even if you did, you have your right to say it. Like I said, I don't know. I completely agree with J.K. Rowling's point of views and blah blah. And you had made. I didn't realize it was just from literally signing.
No, that was the catalyst. And then people started saying to me, "So are you saying that you don't believe men can come women?" And I was like, "Well, no,
Mm,
do you?" So I started sort of defending my position and hers, and saying, "I'm sorry, I've read what she's written.
yeah,
I couldn't find anything but empathy and understanding there." And I said so online. I said, "I'm sorry,
mm,
that does not automatically make you a transphobe to be critical of this gender ideology,
yeah.
which arrived yesterday." So that's how it sort of escalated. Uh, and of course, once you're fully in the bath, there's no you can't tip your toe in and then say something and then go away. Once you're in the bath, you're in the bath and you're soaking
Yeah.
wet. You have to deal with it. So, but I don't regret it for a second. Not seeing how uh, we've been proved right. Women's rights are going down the pan. LGBT people are having to fight for their rights all over again. We've now got a situation in Australia where lesbians are not allowed to assemble without, men are also included. So lesbians can't do. I mean, it's terrifying, and we've been saying this for years, years and years and years. So I've got no regrets at all.
I mean, it's. I just find again a lot of that movement, a lot of it is absurd, and it's like the LGBTQ plus. They always say this, and I always find that a lot of the arguments, what some people don't seem to understand is that you know, gay and trans are two different things, and just because you're supportive of one doesn't automatically like the problems gay people have in the UK are completely different
Yeah.
to the trans problem, and just to group them together just sounds so
Uh, uh,
stupid. It
uh,
makes no sense.
Absolutely, and listen. I've had transsexual friends since the '80s. I used to party with them. I know many online, uh, and they're all appalled at what's been going on. They're stuck right in the middle. They're hated by this side and that side. They're stuck in the middle of this, and and say, I don't use women's spaces. These people, these TRAs. There's a very particular group of them, and there are legion. I mean, legion, who will just go after you. They call them trust scum. If anyone detransitions, like they're called detransitioners when
Mm.
they grow up and you know what they are, and they are caught in the middle. They're hated as well, and you think these people that have just ruined everything by the way they behaved, and this isn't this isn't a movement of people demanding rights. They have rights. What they want is extra rights that they're not entitled to. You're not entitled just because you say you're a woman to use a woman's space. You're not entitled to go in and say, I I believe I'm a woman, therefore I can shower next to your child. You can't do that. That's not your God-given right.
It's scary, and I think you summed up perfectly how much this has destroyed women rights. Like I think we're maybe at the worst stage for the last
Yeah.
10, 20, 30 years I think we've ever been
Yeah.
with women rights. And who are these people that were targeting you in terms of stopping you getting future roles, starting these petitions? Is this like an organized group that do this? Because you don't sound like you're the first person that's had this. Like, is it like
No.
an organized group that just basically
It,
go off?
it's a definite. It's an online. It's online. They're referred to as trans radical activists, and they represent the extreme side. And these are the people that, if you look up the website turfisaslur.com, there's a compilation of the type of things that these people write, and these are very similar to. I can't repeat any of them here because they're just beyond. But when I say these are death, rape, violent abuse of the worst kind, uh, leveled at you time and time again, getting your worst moments. They love with Graham Linehan to taunt him about his divorce and his children. I mean, they go after your family. They go after every person you know. This is why so many women are anonymous online uh, because they're targeted.
Mm.
Women have lost jobs for saying, I believe sex is real. They go after in their thousands and thousands, because this is their world. The online world is paramount. So they live there. We visit a lot, but we don't live there. These people live there. So, and of course, it only takes one account to put out one account with 100,000 followers, put out this person's a turf, kill this turf. I mean, I've never witnessed anything like it. Never. Uh, it was terrifying until I got used to it. I thought this is just unbelievable.
It must
But
have been pretty scary at the start when they're doing these sort of threats and abuse. That must have been fairly scary to start with. And what's been the repercussions since? Like, is it still impacting now? Like, are you able to get jobs, or is that still like? Do people still bring up the fact that you support J.K. Rowling and you believe the things
um,
you?
no, that not so much now. I mean, I have the occasional battle with stalkers and people who just insist that I'm transphobic. But everything is transphobic nowadays. So I've sort of given up being worried about being called that. I've made it very plain that what my position is on it. I have transsexual friends. I grew up with them, but I never used to mix around with people who said I'm a man, but I identify. Well, I grew up. We identified with things like I
Mm.
identify with John Wayne we never identified as anything. So it was a very new sort of phenomenon, and the hatred I've seen towards um, uh, let's say towards the LGB alliance. Two lesbians, all lesbians who fought for gay liberation back in 1970, whatever it was, who used to work with Stonewall. They are smeared, and Bev Jackson and um, oh God, Kate Harris and Kate Barker are smeared beyond belief. Straight people. What do you need this for? They want to destroy everything that we built up, and the good relations and the thing, and all these young people have no idea, and they've been force fed this abysmally revisionist history by the GLAAD and Stonewall, who've just decided no, instead of going, yeah, do you know what? We've reached the summit. There's our flag. Bah, 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 bah. We got gay rights. No, there's always something more. And so, of course, what do? Well, you create more letters, don't you? So you have more little different groups, more flags, more merch, more this, more groups. I just think it's uh, it's got out of control. But now we're seeing a backlash. We are seeing a backlash to it, and they're screaming, "See, we told you if you kept fighting us, this is what would happen. You should have just accepted us." And we're saying, "No, no, 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 no. We warned you that if you kept doing this, if you kept, thinking it's okay to walk down the street with your knob out when children are around, or teach kids in schools about anal sex. No, people are not going to tolerate that. And of course, we're seeing that now. And so many of us are sitting there in frustration going, oh, God, this is not in my name. But of course, we're tagged into it, aren't we? So this is why it's so critical now to make a distinction and say, look, we are not doing that. We don't believe in doing that. But it's very difficult, because what's the easiest defense to do that is to call you a bigot. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world. You just say, you're a bigot. There you go. You're a Nazi. How do you come back from that? What do you say? No, I'm not. It's
It's
crazy.
crazy. And I think you're right. There is a backlash. I think lots of people who are turning away from this theory, and they're not actually, and I think people are becoming more vocal about speaking out against this, like having biological men not in female zones. And I think we saw it with the boxing. I think seems to be the big one where that happened, where that woman was almost beat to pieces. And I think
Yeah,
that's when I think a lot of people must have been watching and thinking this is absolutely absurd. Like this is
yeah,
actually how have we got this far that a woman like that could get beaten to pieces and
yeah.
stuff like that. So I think it seems like maybe the tide is turning. I don't know how much that is the case.
I think you're right. I mean, I do think you're right. It's just unfortunate we had to get to a stage where people actually cheered watching a woman being beaten in the face and then forced to apologize afterwards for getting upset at losing. And many around the world cheered. I think that was a moment where actually it did wake a lot of people up. And I think, because of people like J.K. Rowling, who
Yeah.
has, who has given ordinary people a platform because she will have your back. And people say, well, why did you have to get involved in everything? It's because she believes it. She believes it. She's an extremely kind, empathetic, generous person, and she believes it. She's allowed lots of people to come forward and battle us. But you know something? I think it isn't going to go away without a good tantrum in the cot. It's not going to go quietly. But I think slowly, slowly, people are waking up around the world, um, which can only be a good thing. But misogyny has always been an ever-present feature of society, and it's just sort of gone to double misogyny time now. An acceptable form of misogyny is, I am entitled to come in your. It's very funny how it's not working the other way around, is it? Men aren't affected really by
Yeah.
this. Always the women. So it is time for a pushback.
It's I just maybe simply I just can't believe it's gone this far. Like
Yeah,
there's examples very early on when often when they try a lot of this stuff they try in schools and prisons. But there was examples in LA. I remember when they were putting biological men who identified as females into female prisons, and guess what? They were impregnating women in those prisons, and women were coming out pregnant or
yeah,
from this and getting beaten. And I can't believe from that, which was quite a while ago, 4 or 5 years, it's not like it's just carried on. Like it's just
yeah.
how no one's thought. Like the safeguarding of people is just
I know.
sad.
It's astonishing. I mean, it's astonishing you and I sitting here having this conversation. Like it's astonishing watching Donald Trump saying there are only two sexes, there are only two genders, and that is, And I sat there watching, thinking, isn't it amazing? We've got to the stage where that actually has to be said, and it has to be written down and manned. You think back 10 years ago, you'd be nuts if someone said that. You'd think you're crazy. We know that, but it just shows you how far and how quickly an ideology can spread. And if it's got the funding under the name of diversity, inclusion, and equity, which everyone sort of says is a good thing, and in many ways it is. In some ways, it is a good thing. But when it goes too far on the other side, and it gets out of control, and other people start losing their rights, then it ceases to be a good thing. It's always the barometer is either freezing or boiling. It'd be really nice to find somewhere in the middle, but it's Earth, so what are the chances of that?
What's it like now for you in the acting industry? Because like I feel like for a lot of people I've spoken to on this platform, where it's like ex presenters of TV shows, or you had Matt Letizia, a former football player, and I was saying to him, I feel like if you're a white male over the age of 40, like you've got a very small vocabulary, first of all, and then second of all, no, you're not desirable whatsoever in this world of TV or business. What's it like for you at the moment, as as an accomplished actor, have achieved so much?
Um,
What's it like now?
I think it's pretty much the same as it is. always been for women of a certain age. When they get to a certain age, is you suddenly become invisible. I remember back in the 80s, you'd hear these from these amazing actresses, very well known, everything, and they'd go, I turned a certain age, and suddenly the switch went off, and I couldn't get employed to do anything. And it is true. I mean, it is a young person's thing, and everyone has a career, and everyone has a shelf life, and it's just that the shelf life seems to be getting smaller and smaller. So to keep on working is an amazing thing. But there's also AI going on. There's also all these extra things, the funding and all this stuff is also going on at the same time, and identity politics, which is just adding to everything. So there's lots of different factors, I think, go into making it much harder nowadays than it was when I started. But I've had a fantastic career. I've worked with people I really wanted to work with. I mean, really wanted to work with, and I've had a wonderful career. It's sort of a bonus now to keep working. But there might come a day when I have to turn around and say, no, okay, that's it. It's past your time. But I'm only 56, so I'm hoping that doesn't come too soon.
What's the state of British film TV like in comparison to the world? I always find it interesting because obviously lots of Brits watch a lot of American shows and American shows are so popular. What's like where does Britain's the TV and the film where is that on the scale of globally? Like is it just behind America? Like what's like the how big is
Well,
it?
I used to think it was way ahead. I mean, I used to think that. I mean, there was the famous, Colin Welland speech at the Oscars, "The British are coming." I mean, I know he didn't mean it that way, but there was that whole sort of golden wave, wasn't there, of Chariots of Fire and David Putnam and all these extraordinary things happening. Um, and there are fantastic British films around, but I think a lot of that was down to a sort of inbuilt British snobbery around American things of, they don't understand our humour, they don't understand subtlety, they don't. Well, it turns out they do rather well. Um, Hence, Ricky Gervais' The Office going across the sea. But I think of late. The trouble is, I don't know enough about the industry, the film industry, to tell you the intricacies. But a lot of, we've got great British directors, we've got great British actors, but everything's on a more global thing now anyway. You
Mm.
used to sort of leave Britain, try your hand in Hollywood, and, you either come back or you stay there, you make a decision to do one or the other. It either works out or it doesn't, or you don't want it. But now I think you've got to have it if you want. You've got to really work for it. If you want a career in America, you've got to go over there. You've got to live there. You've got to go through years and years of. I think you've got to really, especially with all these new different companies.
Mm.
So I don't know. I've spoken so much for so long. I've forgotten your original question.
Just where you see the state of British film and TV, like
Yeah. I'm kind of I think because I grew up in such a spoilt era, of the Merchant Ivory and the early Ken Loach, the Mike Lees, when there was a real uh, Hanif Kureishi, the My Beautiful Laundrette. That was another film that is printed on Stephen Frears, printed on my memory as being a turning point of oh my God, we've never seen sort of gay sex in a laundrette between a white man and a Pakistani man ever. And the story, and it was a love story. I mean, to us, it was an incredibly eye-opening, eye-popping um, film, and we used to we had a period where we were producing stuff that made you think and challenged you and did break down barriers and did break down boundaries. And again, I just think everything perhaps now is made because you know you've got to flog it to Netflix at the end of the day,
Yeah.
instead of having that thing of going, no, do you know what? I'm going to make the film I want to make, and then I'll just take it round all the festivals. So I don't know. I think there's something that's been lost. Yeah.
Well, it's been great to have you on, James. It's been great to hear your insights. We have like a closing tradition ritual on this show, where essentially I ask the guest, what is an unpopular opinion that you have that you think should be popular. So it can be trivial, it can be something that we discussed from this episode, or it can be completely random. So, what's an unpopular opinion James has that he thinks should be popular?
Do I have to answer now?
Yes, if you can.
Is this going out live now? Is this going out?
It will be like in a few days. So
Okay.
you've got a bit of time to.
God, my unpopular opinion. People would say that all my opinions are unpopular. I don't think they're controversial at all. An unpopular opinion. Okay, this is really going to be unpopular. All right. I want smoking back in restaurants.
Interesting. Okay.
In a smoking section,
Right.
like, I'd like to be able to go to a restaurant and smoke. That's going to be really unpopular.
Well, it's a good way to end. Thank you for your time, James.
It's been a pleasure. Lovely speaking to you.